You're listening to a podcast called Gary with me, Tom Mann.
And me, Adam Etheridge.
In this week's episode, we'll be talking about the disastrous launch of Google's Gemini AI tool, how on earth leap years actually work, and the sad passing of Curb Your Enthusiasm's Richard Lewis and hairy biker star Dave Myers, and a few other tidbits to keep you entertained. Dave Myers is dead.
Yes, poor Dave.
Poor old Dave. Hairy biker Dave. They actually had quite an interesting story because I read their book.
Oh.
And it's basically like a joint autobiography. So one chapter's Cy, and then the next chapter's Dave, and they just keep alternating about their lives as they were growing up. They didn't meet until quite later on in life. They weren't like, even though they're from the similar part of the world, they didn't kind of grow up together or anything like that. Dave, as I seem to recall, had a lot of health issues. Alopecia was something that he was really struck down with as a kid. He was very self-conscious about it. Obviously, he's an older guy. He grew his hair. They both had long hair, didn't they?
Yeah.
That was something that stuck out. And I think he was quite a sickly child. Don't think he was too well as a kid. So he probably did well to get to the age he did. I know it was cancer that finished him in the end. And he ended up being a makeup artist of all things. Would you believe it?
No way.
Yeah. And whereas Cy got into the movie business, he lived around the northeast, and when Harry Potter started to film in, was it Bamborough Castle, I'm wanting to say, or one of those castles around there?
Was it Alnwick?
Alnwick, that's the one, Alnwick Castle. He kind of was a local guy, kind of not doing too much. He didn't really have a career as such, and he was just like, oh, I'd like to get involved. Can I be in the production? So he ended up being a runner, being a production assistant.
Yeah.
And so gradually he got more and more of that type of work, and then he met Dave doing that because Dave was doing the makeup, and that's how they met. And then somehow or other they came across this idea, they had the contacts, and they got the show.
Yeah.
But really it wasn't like they were trained chefs. It was just that it just happened by chance, really.
Yeah. And I think their kind of their background in terms of I think Dave's wife and I think she's Romanian or something.
Is that right?
Yeah, she's or Italian. She's a kind of he's made comments about the kind of the recipes that he was making or he was using, and he sort of joke at times about sort of his wife being upset about kind of putting this in because it's not traditional or something.
Oh yeah, the Italians are very keen on the traditional recipe.
So I think I'm trying to remember if it is Romania or something. It's something that's specific that he would reference and sort of be like, oh, this is something that my wife would be kind of a little bit like upset if she knew I was putting this in, sort of thing. So I think they were just they're very likable to watch. And I think that was the other thing, is that as they were genuinely people, they came across like that way, and I think that's what for most people who enjoyed watching them.
Definitely.
It was a cookery show by two guys who were just kind of, trying to make food appear to be easy enough to do and presentable enough to be, for people of for everyone.
And I think like any good presenters, they connected with the viewer, and the viewer ultimately felt like they could be their mates.
Yeah.
And that's why there were people like that.
Yeah.
So it's been a sad week because we've lost another celebrity, and that is Richard Lewis, famous for Curb Your Enthusiasm in his latter years, also Robin Hood, Men in Tights.
He was the prince. Or was he the Nottingham? Was he Sheriff of Nottingham?
Do you know what? I'm not entirely sure.
I think he was a prince. I think he was like some sort of like sort of just evil kind of princey kind of guy. So he was just that kind of Jewish type of just kind of the way that he would kind of put himself about was just that kind of very much a negative as spin on sort of life or the situation.
He was so good at that.
So from Curb Enthusiasm, it was very much suited to that partnership with as his friend, as being one of the best friends in the show, and of Larry. And as I say, I don't know whether you you've seen the one of the recent episodes, but it does center around. So spoiler alert if you're going to watch the series, but it centers around his death or their death, and it starts off where they're playing golf, and he says to Larry, he says, "I've put you in my will," and he's like, "No." Larry's like, "No, you don't need to do that because I've got money. I don't need your money," sort of thing. And he said, "Well, I've done it now. It's done, sort of thing." And Larry starts going, "Well, I don't want your money. Just don't give me money. I'm just going to give it away." And they starts this argument about the fact that he's been put in his will, and he's like, "The only reason you put me in your will is because you want me to put you in mine." And he's like, "Yeah, because that would be nice. Now you mention it." And Larry's like, "Well, if I do, I'm just going to make sure I outlive you." And I'm going to do everything I can to outlive you.
Oh gosh, I wonder how he feels now that he's actually passed away.
Well, he never looked very well. I mean,
no.
I mean, even in the early,
he always looks pallid, doesn't he? His colour never looked good.
He always looked like he was sort of hanging on there, and maybe that's just the kind of a great sort of thing to his doctors or whatever to keep him well enough to stay alive, however many years he had. But yeah,
he always had a girlfriend on the go, didn't he, in Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Always had some dolly bird, yeah.
Much to the humour. What was that one where there was the episode where they were doing the couples night around Funkhauser's house?
Ooh.
And they were doing the sort of Mr. and Mrs. questions, and they had to guess their answers, and then Marty Funkhauser's like, "If you had to sleep with somebody else's wife, who would it be?" And then Larry's like, "I'd go for whatever his girlfriend was called, And then everyone else was like, "Well, I could only go for my wife." He's like, "You liar!"
Because Funkhauser always used to have that situation as well, where he used to always be so upset by Larry's kind of reaction to things. It'd always be like the most heinous version of the situation. I mean, obviously that's the comedy, but it was always, I think Funkhauser was always one of the ones who used to call him out and be like, "No way, Larry," and just "I can't believe you're dead there, Larry."
And of course the actor that played him is also dead.
Yeah.
I mean, they were all getting on a bit. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? It's a later in life kind of project for them all.
Yeah.
I've never seen him in anything else. I don't know what that actor's called, but great cast, and just
he was in something called Coach, I believe, or something like that. He was in something where I believe it was sport related. I think it was Coach, something like that. But he's going to be one of those characters now it's going to be sorely missed. And
that means Curb. That is it. Anyway.
They're finishing it, aren't they?
This is the last season ever anyway, so I'm looking forward. I didn't realise it was already available to watch, so I'm going to check that out, and maybe we can cover that in a future episode. But yeah, so long, Richard Lewis. Much comedy.
Yes, and it's a pity that we've got someone who's added such great humour to the world is no longer around. So goodbye to you, sir.
It's the 29th of February today.
It is.
And you only get one of those on a leap year, and we're in a leap year. So here we are. We're talking leap years. We just watched an explanation of what a leap year is. I've got to say, it was a great explanation, but I'm none the wiser.
Yeah. I'm more confused now than I thought I knew before.
Yeah, that just totally went over my head.
Absolutely.
I was nodding along, but really I was just singing Spider Pig inside my head.
It's the same rules of the English language, isn't it? It's like, yes, I before E, except after C, unless it's chef. And then it's like, and it's on the doors open and there's a full moon in the sky. And it literally is just like, it's so complicated. It's like, how could it's done in such a clever way, but actually it's so silly in the fact that it is so complicated. Why is it so complicated? I mean, someone like Dave Gorman was saying, it's like you just make every month 30 days. Or something like that, and it was something like that. There was just, you make it so every month 28 days. So you make every month 28 days. right? And then you have an extra month. So you have 13 months. And and he said that's something. I'm sure it's something like that, because he said, it's because it was all the conversation about how we all say a month's 4 weeks, but actually it's not. It's only once 4 weeks in every 12 months.
Yeah, bloody hell, he's right. Yeah.
So it's like, it was just those moments where you think, how is this sort of complicated system in place when we know that there's and again he was saying about how the different times of the year which were changed, because he was saying because the way that they're named after Roman emperors or something like that, was especially July
and
July,
August,
exactly. But he was saying that the kind of April should be the beginning of the year, because of the way that actually the way that it falls in terms of the I'm trying to think. Gosh, it's one of those where I was hoping you'd be like, oh yes, it's because of this. And I was like,
no, I know nothing of this. Oh shit! But this is the Gregorian calendar, the Pope Gregory or whatever.
Yeah.
It strikes me, is this whole the fact that you were just saying, if we were just logical about it and had every month was 28 days, we'd have 13 months, right? That's the idea you were saying.
Yeah.
Is it just that they want it to be 12 because it ties into 12 disciples or something like that?
It was something like that. 29th of February is, as I say, it's one of those very strange things that I used to always think about, like, do I get paid an extra day? Or do I work an extra day for nothing?
Yeah, what does it really mean? And how shit would it be if your birthday was on the 29th of February?
Well, apparently you have to legally register yourself as on the 1st of March.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're not allowed to register your birth on the 29th.
There we have it.
Lots of things that I don't know about the 28th of March, 29th of February.
Lots of things we don't know about leap years.
Yes.
And probably will be none the wiser the next time we have a leap year.
And hopefully we'll probably just edit all this out. We just watched Dave Gorman explaining the system that he would suggest, and I think that leads kind of quite well into sort of the topic of the news at the moment, where they're talking about changing the school holidays. So they're talking about moving the school holidays around a bit to try and make there be less sort of burnout for teachers and pupils. So they're talking about taking 2 weeks off in the summertime and then moving those to the May and October half terms. So they're trialling this now. They've officially said they're trialling it in Wales. So the Welsh government have decided they're going to try this first. They're going to knock a week off as of September 2025, and they're going to move that on to the October holiday, see how it goes, and if they're happy with that, they're going to then progress to having the second week off the summer holidays and move that to the May. So from then on, that would be the structure. So 2 weeks in May, 2 weeks in October, and 4 weeks in the summertime.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people would think that was a pretty sensible idea. And I don't think just teachers. I think that parents would do as well, surely.
I think you'll get a lot of people who are stuck in a particular way, and they will just think, oh, this is just changing it for the sake of changing something. And I think, in a they say in a post-COVID world, we're now looking at sort of all these sorts of these Victorian or well-established type of systems to see if we can create a more sensible or more functional kind of system in their place. And I do think, from having 2 young kids, and now one just started school and one being in for 2 years, that it is quite evident that the long terms and the long holidays dramatically disrupts their way of being. You know, they're tired during the term time, they're feral during the summer holidays, and you know, that's just on the way that I look at it. But they were saying about for people that are sort of less privileged than, say, my kids are, they don't, you know, being out of education for 6 weeks of the year means that it regresses a lot of their learning.
Absolutely, yeah. And also it's, I think, an extended period like the summer for families to get childcare or activities. It's actually quite expensive to do a long stretch like that. And I think if you were to spread them out a little bit more throughout the year, it would be more manageable for people. I think would be good. And I always think, like, as you say, the summer is so long. It's too long. You know, everyone's fed up by the end, to be honest with you. And we never get, especially in the UK, we never get as good summers as we'd like. Very rarely is the weather as good as we'd like it to be. Whereas, you know, the half terms do feel a bit short sometimes. And if you just had a little bit longer, especially for teachers who are restricted for when they can holiday, it just means that it opens up more opportunities for travel and things like that if you can afford to go abroad. I mean, I think all round, I think it's a really good idea.
I do. I think, you know, just on the face of it, it spreading the time more consistently, much like the example of changing the calendars and all that sort of thing to kind of be, you know, in a facetious way, but, you know, to be more logical in terms of how time and the year is divvied up. I do think, you know, there are times where realistically a system which allows, as you said, allows people to spend more time at different times in the year, rather than it being all, let's just kind of white knuckle it all the way till July, end of July. It just gives people more sort of practical ways of planning their year out. And as you say, for people that are forced, parents and teachers, to sort of take holidays around these times, it'll just open up, I would believe, more times for them to be able to actually find time to rest or do things.
So this is being trialled in Wales first. 2025 is the trial.
Yep, September 2025.
And then we can expect this to be potentially rolled out in the UK. Do we have a date for that? Or
I don't think it's been agreed yet. I think they're gonna just see how it goes in Wales, and then, like, you know, just see it and maybe follow the same model.
Watch this space. Yeah, so this is the Gemini AI, Google's woke AI, inverted commas. And yeah, it's been doing quite the rounds of late. We've just watched a section there from Talk TV, but also Zoe Kleiman, BBC technology editor. She writes, in the last few days, Google's artificial intelligence tool Gemini has been doing what is best described as an absolute kicking online. Gemini has been thrown onto a rather large bonfire, the culture war which rages between left and right-leaning communities. Gemini is essentially Google's version of the viral chatbot ChatGPT. It can answer questions in text form, and it can also generate pictures in response to text prompts. Initially, Viral Pro shows this recently launched AI image generator creates an image of the US founding fathers, which inaccurately included a black man. So she talks about biased data. She goes on to talk about Bard behavior, which Gemini was formerly known as Bard. That was what they used to call it until recently. But I think she concludes, as one senior exec from a rival tech giant put it, to me, watching Gemini's missteps feel like watching defeat snatched from the jaws of victory. So very interesting, very of the time, isn't it? What do you all make of it then?
I just think it just seems like Google have tried to maybe shove something out for, I don't know whether there's some sort of something due to come out that they're trying to trying to get in on, trying to get in front of. So whether there's going to be a new release from something from Elon Musk or something, or the ChatGPT is going to come out with yet another kind of level of AI that they're doing. But I think ChatGPT was guilty of the whole Donald Trump thing as well, because I believe it was when it was asked the similar sort of thing, that it was asked to write a poem about someone. You just pick a person, but then actually, when asked to write a poem about Donald Trump, it was I think it was something like along the lines of I'm not able to comment on that or something, in a very sort of short kind of way of saying it. But it was evident that there was certain restrictions placed, to do something that, or not to do something, because of possibly the idea of I don't like the wokery thing, because it's not sort of phrased right. It's kind of been hijacked. The actual standing up and sort of being aware kind of attitude to things, and being and speaking out about things that you don't agree with, I don't think is wrong. I think the woke title has been hijacked for people who want to silence people who don't fit the agenda. So it is almost like a left fascism, where it should have another title, because it's not being awake to say that my opinion matters, and that's, if you don't agree, you need to not say what you're saying.
Well, I think the woke debate is, if we're obviously going sidetracked here away from the AI side of things, but I think that some people describe it as a form of. I was watching something yesterday, and it was basically somebody was saying it's not a thing about he's not anti-left or anti-right. What he is anti is people. It's like fascism. It's basically like, this is the opinion that you are allowed, and if you veer from it, you will be excluded and shamed. Now, whether or not that's a left or right-leaning opinion doesn't really matter. It's a way of enforcing an agenda, and he doesn't. None of us really like that, and I think that that's the problem that we've got with it. Now, I think that with the Gemini thing that we've just been looking at, the thing with that, I think it's probably well intentioned, because in the early days of AI, I think what happened was exactly the opposite. Basically, it was trained on images of white people, and therefore when they were using some kind of, it was maybe for passports or something like that, and it was using AI for that, it basically wasn't recognizing black people as being human beings, because it wasn't trained to recognize those features. So I think it's kind of possibly an attempt to address that and to mitigate that. And so in a way, I kind of understand why they've done it, if that is why, and that's fair enough. But I think it's like, the problem is that all these AI things, they're only as good as what they're trained on and how they're trained, and ultimately there is a human being behind there with who is guiding it in some way. Yeah,
I mean, that's it. It's either a committee-based movement, which is evident in a lot of kind of this these sort of things that occur, and it does seem like, for me, that it's back to what we talked about on another podcast, where it's about what do people believe and question after they see something or hear something because it's been generated. But it's like putting the wrong sum into a calculator and believing what the calculator is telling you is the right answer, because that's what answer it's given you, and it's not necessarily you've then gone, actually 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. It's that point of the people watching, listening to these things, these media, and going, that's the truth. and then that becoming their truth because they don't question it.
Yeah, you have to question things, and whether it's a human being that's telling you it, or whether it's an AI generated response from a large language model, you have to question these things. And it's like, I was using it the other day for a work purpose, and I basically just asked it to group these words into categories and then to tell me how many of these, basically in each category, how many examples there were of that type of word collocation. And I could see with my own eyes it just wasn't adding up. The numbers weren't adding up, so I was just like, prompted it again. Can you count that again, please? And it was like, oh yeah, sorry, I got that wrong. Let me count that again for you. And it's like, wow. You know, so it's even very basic things it can get wrong quite easily.
Yeah.
So you do have to question, definitely.
They will call you controlling, right? Because boundaries make you a heck of a lot harder to manipulate, don't they? And that's what's going to make some people angry. But just because someone has a negative reaction to your healthy boundary does not mean you did it wrong. And just so you know, it's perfectly normal to feel anxious or scared or second guess yourself. And even when you have the courage to set a healthy boundary, you still feel guilty, don't you? But I just want to point out the fact that you're worried about how they feel, right? You're worried about how your actions affect them. And I think that this means that you're on the right track, because just ask yourself this. Is that being reciprocated? Are they concerned with how their words and actions affect you? You're worried about whether you're disrespecting them, right? And yet, when's the last time they ever asked you if you felt disrespected? How often do we serve and bend over backwards for someone and they say nothing? But the moment you express you're not comfortable overextending yourself in this particular area, they use that as an opportunity to guilt trip you or say that you're being inconsiderate.
That was really interesting.
Yes, this is something that I've kind of I'm buying into at the moment, and along with the kind of the you're already enough attitude to life, trying to embrace the kind of idea that yes, you have things about you that you maybe don't want to portray, or that it's some sort of traits that you don't want. And that's what you work on. And it could be that you are someone who is forgetful or something like that, so you do something to try and counteract it. But then at the same time, if you are someone who is forgetful and you don't always succeed at trying to counteract or manage that you don't then beat yourself up about it, and you just keep trying. And then when it comes to things like this, boundaries, I think it's right. It resonates very well with me, and I, for many years, have found it very difficult to put those boundaries in place with people, and feel very kind of drawn to please, and for my detriment, and that has made me go into many times into a place where I would avoid confrontation and maybe say things I didn't believe to have an easy life, you know.
How long have you felt that way?
Most of my life, in a way, in some form or fashion. And it generally comes around people of authority, so like parents or bosses, partners, and I think that's and even to a point initially with my kids. And I just think it's that part of you that doesn't want to upset other people, because you would rather them be happy with you than be happy with being unliked, if for the right reason.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I was saying to Frank today, bear with me a second because this is sounding very tangential, but we're talking about prime ministers and what a shower it's been in the UK for the last however many years, successive prime ministers that haven't even really been elected, and he was just asking me, well, who was the last good Prime Minister? And I said, well, the thing is, Frank, politics is all about people. And the thing is, whether you're in politics or not is very subjective. And I said, the thing is, as Abraham Lincoln said, you can please some of the people some of the time. You'll never please all the people all the time. And you've got to accept in life, there are people that will like you and there are people that won't like you. Regardless of what you do or how you are, they just won't like you. And the sooner you can accept that, the better. And but it's hard, especially when the people that you care about and you want that approval and that love. It's a hard thing to not try to please people.
It's very true, because we're not told when we grow up. Very few people are told when they're growing up that they should be happy with the way they are, in the kind of rather than the superficial thing of when you're very young. You know, it's kind of, I suppose, it's for most people, it's about, you know, trying to boost your children to a point, but actually we're all driven as products of a previous generation to kind of also act in a certain way to kind of control and expect control over the next generation. And I think, you know, it's done in different means, but I think we're now at a stage that we recognise there's a lot of people with mental health problems, or problems where they're driven by trauma, is the kind of the way that you put it. It's not necessarily purposeful trauma, but it is in terms of either controlling ways or shame or encouraging validation from outside. And I mentioned it to you when we were talking the other day, where I said, you know, one of the guys that I follow, he was saying to his children when they come up to him and sort of say, look, hi, here, Daddy, what do you think to this picture? He will say, what do you think about it? And then let them explain it and then validate that. And in that kind of, he will sort of agree with that, and now, you know, that input that they put into the kind of the thinking of it. I'm not putting this very well, but he validates their thoughts rather than being like, yeah, it's great, honey, or I think it's brilliant, or he mocked by going, you can do better. But that's the thing, is that he's encouraging his children to think about it themselves rather than programming them to always seek approval for something, rather than saying, I'm happy with this, you know, I think this is good.
Right, yeah, it's about being happy with the internal validation, not seeking external approval all the time. And I think that's a really good advice for parents and for anyone, actually. I think this, and I really can see how that would be valuable to a child's sense of self and confidence and all that sort of stuff, if they can be sort of learn to, you know, from a young age to kind of yeah, okay, but what do I think? Do I like it? Because I think it's a bit like what we're doing right now. We're doing something creative. We're doing the equivalent of a child drawing a picture or whatever, really, aren't we?
Yeah.
And okay, we're doing it together. But if we were to, whatever the edit sounds like, and we were to show it to one of our friends, to be honest, that's possibly not a great thing to do. Mm-hmm. Because actually, we're kind of making it for ourselves first and foremost. And if we're happy, that's the primary audience. And this is exactly what I said in that recent YouTube video of mine, is like, I've come around to that conclusion. Really, you have to make it for yourself, because that, if no one else likes it, at least if you like it, that is very, very important.
Yeah. That's true, and I think that's why a lot of people who are in the public eye will not look at critics, because for two reasons. One, it doesn't matter if you do something that's shit or good for other people ultimately, because the whole point of doing something you enjoy doing, for example, is the enjoyment of doing it. And okay, you do things that you don't enjoy, but the reason for doing things you don't enjoy may be financial gain or status or whatever. But the fact that the validation doesn't come from having more money or having more status, that is just an advantage. Having a job that gives you more money, or having a job where you have influence to do good or something like that, you might not enjoy the job or what it does you have to do to achieve those aims. But likewise, the actual, it doesn't matter about what other people think about what you're doing in that respect. I mean, I'm not talking about saying you do anything you want and dash the world, but equally, if you're doing something that's valid to you, then that's the point, is that, you do something that's valid for a reason. So, there may be people out there who don't take certain jobs because they want a life balance with their children, or they change what they do in life to suit a need. And it's the need part is the bit that we need to address, because if the need is based off an external requirement, then that's the problem. I want more money because I think it will give me more power, or give me more kind of control, or people will like me because I've got things. If that's the aim, it's never going to be resolved by having more money.
Just finally on that subject, I heard a good quote the other day. It's a little bit self-help guru-y, a bit kind of cheesy sounding, but he said, "I'm the CEO of my actions. I'm not the CEO of my outcomes." In that you can only ever be in control of what you do, but you can't be in control of the result of that. So, if we set ourselves the target of making a podcast once a week for the next 5 years, we could achieve that. Possibly that's a bit too ambitious, because there are bound to be weeks when we can't do it. But what I'm saying is, we're kind of in control of that. But
yeah,
if we set ourselves a target that said we'd like to get 10 million viewers by X time, that's an outcome that we just cannot control.
Yeah.
So be more concerned about the process measures, the things that you can do, rather than the things that you're trying to achieve, because that way you'll get more happiness, because you can be more in control of that.